Hi, I'm Vicki, and I want to talk to you about what's coming up in new versions of Kubernetes. So, as I'm recording it today, 1.18 is the current newest version, but around KubeCon time, we're also looking at uh, coming up 1.19 release. So, I'll do a little sneak peek as well. So in 1.18, we saw a lot of features moving to stable again. So this is really, as the team calls it, a fit and finish release. We also see 11 features moving to beta and 12 new alpha features. A couple of things I want to highlight. There are a lot of exciting storage features that are released, and there were scheduling features as well that I will talk about in a little bit. Two other new features I'm quite excited about are the horizontal pod autoscaler controls, as well as kubectl debug, which we talked a little bit about in a keynote last year that is finally happening this year. Okay, so storage, I think one big thing that I'm excited about is the raw block device support graduating to stable. So if you're running any more sophisticated stateful workloads, if you're running your own database that has high demand on performance and latency on I/O that might have its own storage format, this is the feature for you. We also saw cloning graduating to stable, and a new feature called generic data populators that allows you to get pre-populated volumes. This is super useful if you're doing backup or restoring. And we also see immutable secrets and config maps for any sort of safeguarding of the data that your application reads. And also CSI support on Windows. In terms of scheduling, we have a lot of more sophisticated controls, I would say. So right now, or it's always been the case that you can run multiple schedulers on Kubernetes. And you could run into a problem where your different schedulers are out of sync. Essentially, their views of the world are different, and you can run into race conditions where two schedulers maybe try to schedule things onto the same node at the same time. And so to overcome that, now you can say, run one scheduler, but have multiple profiles. So you can still satisfy needs of different types of workloads that need to be scheduled differently, but you can have one scheduler that takes care of the scheduling, so you can avoid these types of issues with race conditions. We also see taint-based eviction graduating to stable. I had to look this one up actually because I thought that I'd been using it forever, and it was a feature that was released in 1.6, but it is finally going into GA. And last but not least, we see pod topology spread graduating to beta. This feature allows you to control how your workloads are spread across your different topologies. So for example, if you have a multi-availability zone cluster, you can say how you want to spread your deployment across the different availability zones. And if you have anything that's slightly more sophisticated deployed on your cluster that is auto-scaling, you might find yourself sort of wanting for more finer grain control over how your workloads scaled up and down. So now you can take advantage of this horizontal pod autoscaler control that is now in alpha. And here's an example on the right where you can see the new YAML structure for defining the behavior for how you want to scale up and scale down. And you can really dig into the rate of scaling if you want to scale up at different rates based on the current replica size, and define multiple policies if there are different rates for sort of different stages of scaling. These are all definable now. And kubectl debug. This was a feature that I was super excited about last year when we released ephemeral containers. So ephemeral containers were added in 1.16, and just to catch you up on the context, so when you have a pod, it's immutable. So you define the list of containers in the pod, and you deploy it to the cluster. And if later you're like, oh, there's an error in my pod and I want to like debug it, you can't just go in and install something new and be like, oh, I need a different container that has more tools to, if you run a like TCP dump or something and you're running an Alpine image, like, oh, you got to like redeploy your pod again. So now you can have ephemeral containers that essentially are containers that you add on later to a running pod. So here's an example. If I want to have a shell in my pod and none of the containers in my pod have a shell installed, you can attach, for example, a Debian ephemeral container into the pod and then run the exec again. So the kubectl debug command really just like wraps that up for you. So you can just say like, oh, I have a pod. Let me run kubectl debug, and then it creates the ephemeral container, attaches it, and you have a nice debug workflow for anything that's already running in your cluster. And also very excited about the controls you can get over how the API server handles requests. Not super proud to say it, but it's possible that my team had previously been DOSed by one of our own applications spamming the API server. So now we can prevent that by defining this flow schema. You can say, so right now you have controls over how the API server is protected from requests generally. But with this new feature, you can say, give different priorities to different types of requests. So instead of saying when you're DOSed, you protect your API servers from going down by rate limiting all requests, you can say, okay, user requests should go through so that admins don't lose access, but maybe some other types of lower priority requests, maybe from your applications, get rate limited. Another feature that graduated to beta is the Node Topology Manager, which again, very excited about from running machine learning workloads point of view. So a lot of times you want to control how your workloads are scheduled on the hardware itself. In this example, there are 8 GPUs on this server. Some of the pairs of GPUs have higher bandwidth connection, and they're faster if you schedule on those two together. So if you have a GPU workload that uses 2 GPUs, now the node knows how to optimize and say give you a pair of faster GPUs rather than 2 that are maybe crossing the CPU boundary and using lower bandwidth connection. There are a lot of other features that I didn't cover. IPv6 graduated to beta. A lot of people are starting to use the certificate signing requests API. And also, you can now run dry runs on your requests. So it used to be you would run them and the diff would be done on the client side. With this feature, you can actually do the diff on the server side. So you get a more accurate view. And of course, without our amazing community, none of this would have been able to be shipped and realized. So thank you so much to all of our contributors. And it's so amazing to see the trend of the number of contributors happening release over release. And the community is just so active and so wholesome. So thank you. And then one last thing, for the 119 sneak peek. I want to call out a few features that, as I was scrolling through the beta release notes, I got super excited about. One is generic ephemeral volumes. So now you have more flexibility than just using empty dir. And there's IPv6 dual stack support on Windows. And then even more to the kubectl debug workflow, you can debug nodes by running in the nodes host namespaces. And last but not least, there will be support for cgroups v2. So everyone who's been complaining about it until now, you can relax now. Thank you so much.